When I was working on the recent D&D for Kids Build an Adventure video, I noticed something on the Wizards of the Coast website that I hadn't seen before, and I'm kinda sure that some of you haven't seen it either, or at least a bunch of people haven't seen it. Let me show you what I found. Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where we love geeky wisdom. If you're new to the channel, my name is Brian, and we release new videos weekly, so please consider subscribing and turning on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of the content. So on the D&D website I was talking about, right there between the How to DM and For Educator buttons, there's a resources option that I never really noticed before. Now, I'm not the only one to notice this. In fact, I just saw a video over on the Insight Check YouTube channel that highlights some of the same things that I'm talking about now, but they do a good job instead of detailing ways that D&D could simplify their rule set a little bit. I'll link it in the comments below, right below the subscribe button, if you want to check it out. But let's take a look at some of these further resources. Right here on the Educator Resources page that you may already be used to if you've seen those videos, there are a bunch of buttons here in red right at the top, or at the top of this heading section. What is D&D, how to play, how to DM, resources, and For Educators. I'm on the For Educators page right now, but let's click over to the resources and see what we've got. So we've got some things like what are the ability scores, what are difficulty checks, what to do on your turn. This is something that comes up quite a bit, I think, for new players. A glossary of common terms, which is really useful for everybody that's starting out. Then they have some things that are aligned to the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle starter set. So they've got the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle story tracker. They have a player's video for how to prep for that adventure. And then they have a sample encounter. I'm gonna not cover these in the video because I think it is better to cover some of the main things that anybody that's playing any adventure in any campaign may be able to use. So we're gonna go through the ones above, and then I would like to go through this whole character sheet tracker thing here that tells you about it. We'll get to that in a second, but let me go back up to the first one. What are ability scores? I like this because it's easy to read. It's got a good graphical element to it so that it breaks down each ability score in a picture format so that you can kind of tell this is what they're trying to say about these things. Pretty well done. And I also like the fact that they are using daggers in every example. So dagger, dagger, dagger.
Oh, I'm stabbing the guy 3 times. I'm doing my catchphrase, man. Dagger, dagger, dagger.
Okay, so let's examine this a little bit further. So what are the 6 abilities? 6 abilities briefly describe a creature's physical and mental characteristics. These abilities appear on an adventurer's character sheet and in a monster stat block. We'll get to both of those shortly. Here and in the What's an Ability Check video, we use daggers to explain them, so I like it. Okay, first is strength. It's your ability to lift a heavy crate full of daggers. Pretty easy to explain. But then they also tell you a skill that is associated with that ability. So for example, athletics is here, and then it gives example uses for the player. This is really helpful to kind of understand what does it mean when we're rolling up and assigning our abilities so that we have an idea of where we're placing the scores based on what we want to be really good at. So I like this. Dexterity, a little bit more obvious when it comes to daggers, because this is being able to accurately throw a dagger from a distance, as an example, and it measures agility. So then there are some skills listed: acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth, along with examples of those particular skills. So I'll just jump into sleight of hand. Examples of that are picking someone's pocket or conceal or cleverly manipulate a handheld object. So, you know, it's spelling it out in real terms. Constitution is being able to, you know, continue the fight after you've been stabbed or slashed by a dagger. That makes sense there. And then your intelligence is, knowing that a sword is much longer than a dagger. You'd have to be pretty smart to figure that out, I guess. But it's the things that measure reasoning and memory, and then it gives a bunch of skills associated to intelligence. I found that differentiating between intelligence and wisdom may be a challenge for new players, so this is good that they're giving these specific examples. For wisdom, it's the ability to know not to bring a dagger to a sword fight. So not know all the specific measurements of a sword and a dagger. That would be your intelligence. Being wise is, not to bring the wrong weapon to a fight. So this is a good example, kind of tongue-in-cheek throughout, as you can tell, but I like that they're putting it in real terms. And then there's a bunch of skills underneath. So animal handling, insight, medicine, perception, and survival. And last, we've got charisma. So charisma is being able to talk your way out of that sword fight, and it's your force of personality. So deception, intimidation, performance, and persuasion. So you can see that this is sort of a really unique way. It's mind-boggling to me why they don't include this in the starter set or in the player's handbook as at least a handout that a DM can reproduce and give to the players, because I think it's useful for someone that is new. Alright, difficulty class examples. This is a way of explaining one of the biggest core mechanics of the game, which is you're rolling a d20, you're adding a bonus, and then you have your result. And so it tells you about the target number that the DM is really deciding, and then it gives some very common ones. So very easy, DC 5, an example of that would be climbing a tree. Easy would be 10, and that's recalling that you know about defeating zombies from the last time that you had to deal with them, or maybe you heard about it. And then here's a difficulty class of medium, which is 15, which is identifying rare mushrooms or unique properties or going with that nature skill. So there's good examples here of each one of these. Hard, now you can understand a little bit better when you know that you're rolling a d20, because hard is a 20. So if you don't have that skill, your only way of hitting that is to roll a natural 20. Unless you're playing with the rule that every natural 20 succeeds on skill checks. That's not in the rules as written in 5e. It may be changing, but who knows? You can house rule whatever you'd like. But so a 20, though, it makes sense that this is now harder. Not only is the number going up, but it makes it easy to explain that these are all based on rolling a 20-sided die. That's why these numbers are what they are. So very hard, DC 25, makes sense. It's above a 20. You have to have some skill in whatever you're trying to do. You have to have a bonus to make this work. And nearly impossible is nearly impossible because you would have to roll a 20 and have a plus 10, or have enough of a bonus that you could roll lower than that, which is really hard to do. So this is why it's nearly impossible. This is a really good way of explaining how this works. I would also argue that this is a good way of explaining how combat works when it talks about armor class. You just explain that you're substituting your ability to hit with a weapon or a spell attack modifier, if it's a spell, in place of it being a skill. So this is, I think, really useful. And again, in my bag of tools that I'm going to be using for new players. I think this is good because you've sort of got a quick reference of what you can do on your turn, the step-by-step actions of combat, the advantage and disadvantage rules, rolling a d20, how that works with the basic mechanic of roll a 20, add something, and then your score equals your result, and that's interpreted by the Dungeon Master, and then additional actions that you can do. These actions in combat, by the way, I think are underutilized by new players who basically just swing the sword and hit, or cast the spell, or run away, right? Like, there are some basic things that people tend to do if they don't know that there are options. So just having this in front of you, even though you're not trying to railroad them down the path of selecting these every time, it at least lets them know that, oh, I can disengage, or I can use my action to dodge, or I can help someone else. These are things that aren't intuitive to a new player all the time, so I like the fact that they're spelling this stuff out, what it's like for taking damage, and then other things to know. So this is sort of a quick reference. It's not just what you can do on your turn, really. It's a few things about the rules kind of summed up. Again, this should be the basic handout in every starter set, I think, and at least something that you should be able to hand out to your players if you bought the Dungeon Master Guide or the Player's Handbook. It should be included. But, here it is. They're including it on their website. Okay, glossary of terms. Self-explanatory, but really useful. I think this is something that people could have at their table in front of them if they're still learning about things. What are all of these different things that they're hearing about, like what is an encounter, even understanding that an encounter as a new dungeon master is a scene in your story that you're trying to play out, and maybe it's a combat encounter, maybe it's a social encounter. Just understanding these rules a little bit better for new people that are even going to be DMs. They don't necessarily just have to be players. So this is really good stuff. I like the fact that they're including common mechanics with this too, because it's understanding the terms of ability check and the terms of advantage and disadvantage here. I think it works really well, especially with the spell casting down here. Like, what is the difference between a spell slot, a cantrip even? These are good things to have at quick reference if you are, trying to help new players, or if you just want to understand how the new additions are labeling things if you played D&D before, but you're not sure what they're calling it nowadays. This is a good little handout to have as well. Okay, so these were the 4 that were on the top of this page, although I do think that the what to do on your encounter is a little mislabeled. I like the D&D quick reference better because it's a little bit more than what you can do on your turn, but at any rate, you should check out the other stuff around Dragons of Stormwreck Isle if you'd like to, or if you want me to do it, put a comment down below and I will definitely go over these and how they work. But I love this feature. I think this is really useful because a character sheet can be a daunting thing for a new player. And so even the ones that are pre-done and you get a pre-filled out character sheet, it's like, I don't know what to do with all this information. Here's an interactive tool that will let you sort of understand how it works. So here's a sample D&D character sheet. And also they have a monster stat block, which is really useful for new DMs. And then you can scroll and then click the indicators to explore. So here's the front of the sheet. They have a toggle to the back. So front of the sheet. And then I can click through. So for example, I'm going to click a few of these. So let's say here is armor class. There is a little line going out to this one, and it explains what armor class means. This is the version of D&D Beyond that is just a piece of paper that you're having in front of you, but they want to give you a way to explain all that stuff. D&D Beyond, you click on the things and then it happens for you. It even rolls for you if you want, which is great. But if you just want to play with pen, paper, and dice, it's useful to be able to go through all this stuff and really examine it a little bit better. So, proficiencies here, it tells you all about that, when you should use those things, how it works in certain situations. I can go over here to my speed and I find out that it's in each round of combat, your character moves up to the total indicated on your speed. And if you use an action to sprint, your character can move up to double this distance. So it's really good to have all this information here. On the back of the sheet, same thing. Like if you have one of the pre-generated characters, here is information about your race and racial features. Here's how to customize any preset characters. This is really helpful if you are using a pre-generated character so that you can understand, hey, here are some steps to make this character your own. Really useful. And then it's got spellcasting, spell list explanations for those people that are DMing for the first time, or really DMing at all in a new edition. If I know 5e is going away and we're getting the next evolution of this in a couple years, but if you're coming from an old school game and you want to come check this out, here's how they do their stat blocks now. So you can get the name of the monster over here and you can find out what armor class is and how that works. And then you can also understand how it works with the creature features. So creature features section here tells all the unique stuff about this monster. Really interesting way of making sure that you've got the right information here. Also, here are some official character sheets. The ones for, again, they're pushing their starter set. I don't blame them. And then there's the 5th edition character sheet itself, where you can go in and take a look and download this material. Most of you probably have already seen that, but you may not know that the free pre-gens are here. So you didn't even have to buy the starter set to get these pre-gens. Really useful for getting some first level pre-gens that you can just jump in with and customize and use yourself for your game. There's even some really good artwork on these, I think. So yeah, useful stuff. Okay, thanks for joining me for this quick video while I explored some of these further resources that D&D has put together to help streamline the basics of the game. If you're helping new people get started with the hobby, some of these resources may be a great way to help them take their first steps down the road of being a D&D enthusiast. And that said, it reminds me of a bit of geek philosophy from 1985. Roads Where we're going, we don't need roads. Cheers.